What if I told you that human design had actually been intentionally tampered with and distorted at the source in order to dilute its power as a system of personal transformation? Sounds pretty out there, but I actually have receipts, and so in this video I'm going to outline this theory that I've been working on for a while. Back in October, I published a series of 3 blog posts, and I sent them out to my list at the time as well. I didn't know it at the time, but I described what I now believe to have happened to human design. In order to take you along on this journey, first we're going to start with talking a little bit about the origins of human design, and then I'm going to walk you through how I think it got distorted and tampered with. And then finally, I'm going to share some ideas for what we can do about it and how we can restore it to what it was meant to be. So, human design is a system of self-understanding that comes to us from a non-ordinary state of consciousness. So this basically means that it was downloaded or channeled, and it came across via an average white guy living in Ibiza in the 80s. And he was basically like burning out, partying way too hard, taking every kind of psychedelic that he could get his hands on, living in a tree for a while. He took some unknown substance, and then had this 8-day, 8-night encounter with what he called the voice. And the voice said, "Are you ready to work?" And then proceeded to transmit to him all of the details of this incredibly complex system. And then he came out of this experience and looked back on his notebooks and thought, wow, I must be crazy. And then he actually started working through it and realized that, no, this actually kind of makes sense. And so we started teaching it, and so on and so forth. The original transmission differs from what you will find on the internet today as human design. The original transmission essentially had a set of mechanics, and these mechanics were how the position of the planets dictates the way energy flows through our body. So it's based on our astrology, it's based on our birth time, it's based on the position of the planets, and it's based on a map of the energy body that is very similar to the chakra system. So if you're curious in digging deeper in this, I have a video right here where you can go and you can learn about the original mechanics. But for the purposes of this video, the details aren't super important. But in essence, they're basically just these 2 primary mechanics. So definition type, basically how many different islands of energy systems you have in your body, and then definition mode, whether each of those energy systems is a designed to do or designed to wait. And then there was also an idea of centers that are defined versus centers that are undefined, how those centers operate in our energy body. And so right off the bat, we have, like, this is not a system that's telling us what to do, right? It's telling us how energy operates in our body, and it's telling us, like, whether we might be more inclined to act without thinking or talking about it versus whether we're more of a contemplator and more of an observer, and then, like, we observe first and then act. These mechanics don't tell you what to do, right? They just tell you how your energy flows in your system and basically kind of just validate your experience. It's like having a map of your own operating system and knowing that your operating system is very different from everybody else's, right? It's unique to you. So the first thing that kind of should have already been a red flag is that by the time he got to Ibiza, this guy in like 1985, well before his experience with the voice, this guy was already calling himself Ra, which is like the name of a sun god. Like, it's not humility, right? It's kind of ego red flag already there. And that was before. He started calling himself Ra in the early, like in 1985, before he had this experience. So that was not an afterwards thing, it was a before thing. But this type of ego, we're going to see later on, is kind of what made him open and vulnerable to this corruption that I think happened, and I'm going to tell you about. So in my October blog series, I write about a couple of concepts. There's the corollary to Clarke's third law. So this states that any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial is indistinguishable from a god. There's the concept of the Egregore, which is more of like a homegrown astral thought form that can dictate and control our lives. So egregores can take all sorts of different forms, but the most, like, the common thread is that they thrive on power and control. And they feed off of ego. Right. And so whenever you have a person who has a high need for control, um, they become vulnerable to this kind of takeover. I'm not positive that it's an egregore that hijacked human design. It's also possible that human design became its own egregore, and that Ra Uru Hu kind of fed this like astral being that he created, and that it ended up kind of needing to take over and manipulate and control. So I actually even encountered an egregore while I was writing that blog post series. So if you want to read the story about that, I'm not going to go into it in this video because I don't want to bring its attention upon me anymore. But if you want to read that blog post, check the link in the description. It's really pretty fascinating. Okay guys, so Future Cat here. I'm just editing this video and I have to share this interaction that I had with the egregore live on Threads the other night. So I posted this. I can't do XYZ because I'm a projector. Babe, listen to yourself. You've made an identity out of something that's a completely made up catch-all category that has very little basis in the system it's based on. Projector isn't an identity, it's a prison. All of the types are, in fact. When you wake up to this, it's going to take time to decondition yourself from following a rigid strategy that is supposed to help you find success, but ultimately leaves you feeling empty. Okay, and so then this person responds, sea lioning, by the way, but have you tried true sidereal? Side note, it's not always, like, not all sidereal astrologers, but somehow it's always a sidereal astrologer that comes in here with this. Have you tried a true sidereal version, though? Eyes emoji. If not, I'll gladly generate it for you, just to see if it resonates more. First off, I'm not giving my birth info to some random person that has just popped in and started sea lioning in my threads, but I'll respond, I'll engage in good faith. Okay, so I say, no thanks, I've looked into it a bit and I'm not a fan of sidereal HD at all. The original transmission was crystal clear that it's meant to use the tropical zodiac. It's the type system that's the problem, not the gate mapping to the zodiac IMO. And then this person comes in and says, that's the funny thing though, sweat smile. The zodiac wheel used is irrelevant. It's just the planetary placements in relation to the I Ching wheel. And the original HD calculation puts gate 25 at the true sidereal vernal equinox. Okay, sure. And I say, yeah, I'm not saying that you're wrong. That's your path. My path is original, aka revealed, human design mechanics as applied through the lens of the tropical zodiac. I'm a scientist at heart, and so I choose the variables to control and the ones to modify. And right now I'm sticking with testing the original revelation before it was polluted by the creator, not altering the parameters of that revelation. And then they come back and say, this is where it starts to get sea lioning. But do you understand what I mean, though? When I say the zodiac wheel is irrelevant to the I Ching placements, and I say, and at this point, like, I'm in bed. I'm, like, ready to turn off the light. And so I just say, I'm trying to respectfully end this thread and go to bed. Have a good one. And then this person goes, I'm trying to fix my mistake. I thought the humans would use 0 degrees Aries. So you're coming in here trying to make me think that you are a channel of the original voice? Are you kidding me? Like, you can't even make this shit up. Like, wow. Anyway, back to Past Cat and the rest of the video. So then the last part that I want to touch on here when I'm talking about kind of this background stuff is, so my personal history in psychic development. I have a little over 3 years of psychic training in an established lineage of the psychic arts. And in my lineage, you do not learn to channel. Like, if you're interested in channeling, you have to go through the intro year and then you do another year and then you can start in the channeling program. But for the first 3 or 4 years of your whole training, you are not channeling. You are not allowing anything else to come into your body, because you need to learn how to discern your own energy, how to move things out of your space, how to hang up the phone, how to end that conversation when the channel is over. And these are the types of basic spiritual protections that I see lacking a lot in all over, but especially whenever we start to see these systems that get distorted into systems of fear and control, it's probably because an egregore or something else saw that there was an opening, came in, and ends up using the leader as a pawn in their goal of manipulation. So learning how to discern your own energy is really, really important if you are going to be doing any sort of channeling. And we know for a fact that Ra Uru Hu, this founder guy, did none of it. He had no protection. He had no spiritual hygiene whatsoever. One of the examples of channel material that I respect the most is from a group from Kentucky who in the 1980s made contact with the Ra, right, the Egyptian sun god, though it turned out that he actually wasn't a sun god. They were just a friendly neighbor that had popped on by to see how things were going in the second millennium BC and ended up getting confused for a deity, and hijinks ensue. But the thing that really struck me about this group, and there were three people involved. There was a channel who was in a complete, she was out. She was in a trance. She was, for all intents and purposes, asleep. Had no conscious memory or awareness of what was going on. There was the channel, there was the scribe, and then there was the questioner. So one person was asking questions, another person was writing and transcribing the sessions, listening in, and then transcribing the tapes. And then there was the channel. So this group of people had an elaborate set of rituals and protection practices and prayers, and they would have to have a Bible open to the book of John above her head, and a incense and a chalice, and everything had to be, her hair had to be in the perfect arrangement. If it was too wild, the message couldn't get through. And they described several instances where they had encounters with other beings that kind of tried to pretend like they were Ra and wiggle their way in and disrupt the message, right? And so when I heard about this, I started, when I kind of started putting these two things together, it's okay, so this Ra Uru Hu guy who channeled human design, no protection mechanisms, no spiritual background, no spiritual hygiene, no meditation practice, just a psychedelic junkie, right? Totally just out there, as opposed to, real hardcore channeling where you have these elaborate rituals and you still get, interference, and sometimes you get, beings or people possessed by beings coming in and trying to harm you, right? The question that keeps coming back into my mind is how am I supposed to believe that this psychedelic junkie who with no spiritual practices and obviously a huge ego wasn't vulnerable and wasn't going to get hijacked by these malevolent entities? So that's what I think happened. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit through the history of human design and kind of build my case. So from 1987 was when he had the experience. In the early 90s, he started teaching it. He took a couple years to kind of figure out how to put it together and how to teach it. I think the first book, the Black Book, the first book was actually published in 1990 or 1991, and that's when he started teaching it. And you can find early lectures of his on the internet. I will actually link to one in the description below. He does not talk anything about type or strategy, right? There's no mention of that. It's all about this pattern of definition type, definition mode, and defined versus undefined centers having different characteristics. The other thing about the original mechanics is that it was very experimental. The messaging was try it, see how it works for you, right? See if this fits. And most people who tried it said yeah, this does describe me, but let's maybe continue to refine it and have our own experience of it. And slight side note is that the slower moving the outer planets are transiting through gates so slowly that Pluto's placement through this period of time is going to color your experience of it, right? We don't know, with astrology, we've experienced 5,000 years of observation. With human design, we have less than 40 years of observation. So we can't really say this is how it works. We can say these are the mechanics, let's refine it, let's ask questions, let's see, are these generalizations true or are they not, is there more nuance to it, right? So then when he came back in 1997 with Type and Strategy, a few of his early teachers, particularly Chaitanya and Zeno, who were their first, they were his first American teachers, started to question it, and they were like, wait a second, this doesn't, where did this come from? In essence, they were just like, this doesn't make sense to us. This doesn't follow the original mechanics. Where did this come from? And his response to them questioning him was for him to freak out. He called them names. He yelled at them. He ran out the door, slammed the door, never to be seen again. His company would then go on to slander them, sue them, basically push them out of the human design community. Really toxic behavior, like just for questioning and for asking, like, where did this come from? And then subsequently saying that they weren't going to teach it, that they were going to stick to the original transmission. And their refusal to accept his opinions as truth led to him running away from us in an emotional huff, shouting and slamming the door, never to be seen again. Real demure, real mindful behavior, right? So there's definitely a change, right? So we had the original mechanics, we had the original teaching of, see how this works, see what it is, and then 10 years later there was, this is how it works. It's my way or the highway. If you don't follow what I say, then I'm kicking you out of the club. And that's cult leader tactics, right? That's manipulation. That's emotional abuse, right? Anytime somebody tries to tell you that your perception or your experience is not valid and that theirs is the way, that's manipulation. That's coercion. That's not healthy. So it turned into a control doctrine. It turned into a cult, essentially. So let's get into my theory, right? My theory is that he got kind of lucky during that original revelation. I think that the voice kind of was looking for somebody to pass this system through, and they knew that they only had a short window. And I also think that the voice was just kind of like, it was a transmission probably straight from the galactic center that just had to go through, and it wasn't ever going to be heard from again, right? Just an 8-day harmonic convergence experience. And so I think the voice chose him because they knew that he was a little off his rocker enough that he would share it. And that's kind of like, you need somebody that's going to go out and teach it. And I also think that that's where his concept of no choice came from. I think that's his interpretation, and I don't think that comes from the voice. I think he used the concept of no choice to give himself a little bit of cover and say, like, I got no choice. I just have to tell you this is, so that he didn't feel like weird or like worried that he was going to get rejected or ostracized for sharing it. But yeah, so I think he got lucky with the voice, and I think the voice kind of chose him for that reason, but then it backfired. And then I think later on, once he started to achieve some measure of fame, that he was susceptible to the same kind of tampering that we saw with the Ra channeling group. And then another entity, Egregore, interdimensional, whatever, somebody who doesn't have our best interest at heart, something who saw the potential for human design to revolutionize our way of living, to give us our power back, came in and said, yes, I am the original voice, you must listen to me, and then started feeding him a bunch of crap and telling him that he was the greatest and that everybody should worship him. And because he had such an ego, right? Remember Ra, right? He accepted it, and he went forth and forced it through. In 2019, Chaitanya writes in his newsletter that human design's current form is largely nonsense, bordering on and often crossing into the insane, designed to make people unhappy and dependent, and no longer has anything to do with what was originally presented as its revelation. So that should say enough, right? This is somebody who has been studying the system since 1993, watched this whole thing happen, and says that what is sold as human design now has almost nothing to do with what is really human design, right? So this other entity, probably an egregore of some sort of control mechanism, came in and said, oh, okay, well, let's twist it, and like pushed out like 99% of the good stuff and filled it with this control doctrine. So Chaitanya also calls the human design type system a caste system, and I kind of love this because it was designed to put the manifestor at the top because Ra Uru Hu had a design to do with no defined sacral, which is the hallmark of a manifester. And if you think about it, like, manifester sounds great, right? Everybody wants to manifest, right? But generator and projector are appliances. And then a reflector is like, oh yeah, you're special. Okay, you're the rare one, and kind of put on a pedestal. And it was all designed to position, is designed around his ego, to put him at the top, to put his teachers next, his analysts, and then the clients at the bottom. This pyramid, total classic pyramid scheme, just funneling money, fame, influence up to the top. So yeah, this kind of spiritual manipulation really grinds my gears, and it's just what I'm out here to, it's what I'm making it my life's work to try to destroy and uncover. And so this is why I'm building a community of people who are interested in researching the original mechanics of human design and anything else related to it, and reclaim your authority from these outside systems and find it for yourself. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please click the link in the description below and join my email list, and I will tell you more about the community inside. So in the intervening years, Zeno and Chaitanya continued to teach their version of human design in this like tiny corner of the internet, to a small but steady number of students. And they've managed to preserve this original teaching and kept it pure from the pollution that has distorted mainstream human design. Over the years, Zeno grew ill and passed not too long ago, and so now it's only Chaitanya. He's literally a hermit living in the Himalaya most of the year. He's still alive. He's still teaching. It's still there. And we owe a huge debt of gratitude to him and to Zeno for recognizing the distortion, standing up against this system of control, and for preserving the original teaching. And so now it's up to us to pick up the torch, to learn the original mechanics, to teach them to other people, and to help people realize, like, you don't need an expensive certification. You just need to learn the very fundamentals, to learn to listen to your body, and to have people to talk about it with. So that's why I'm building, like, that's why I'm doing everything I'm doing. And I have I have a course that's going to walk you through the experimental process, the original mechanics, as well as take you on a journey through your relationships, your past, and uncovering your traumas in relation to your body graph. If that sounds interesting to you, it's currently in beta, but you can join the wait list at the link in the description below. And I'm hoping it'll be done by the end of summer. Just to recap, because this was kind of a lot, right? What have we got? Human design started as an experimental set of mechanics. Planet here, planet there, opens channels, energy can flow. How many different energies, like areas of energy flow, do you have? Does any energy flow from a motor center to your throat? That's all it is, and that's all it needs to be. There's so many layers that we can go deeper. We can study the gates. You can get my book. You can study the nature of each center, but it teaches itself over time. It unfolds before you. You don't need to give your authority to another person in order to learn the system, in order to benefit from it. So I just want to help people access the original mechanics without having to go through the cult brainwashy side of things. And I want you to understand that you're not broken, especially if you have a design to wait, or if you have split definition. Like, those types of things can make people feel like there's something wrong with them, especially designs to wait, because our society is constantly conditioning us to do. And also split definition is so validating when you realize, like, there's multiple, like, that's why you feel pulled in different directions, is because there's multiple different energy systems in your body. And then to recognize why you keep being attracted to the same kind of person, because they bridge your split. But are you seeking them out of interdependence or out of hyperdependence? So, yeah, that's what I've got to say about this. Get on my email list to join the revolution. Come help restore human design to what it's originally intended to be. subscribe to my channel. I've got a lot more content like this coming, not just human design, but other spiritual stuff. And yeah, share this with anybody who you think needs to hear the truth. So yeah, I'll see you next time.